Discussion is DCA 212005, consideration of amending the definitions of bedroom, kitchen, and bathroom in the Dallas Development Code.
Thank you. And with no speakers, did you want to begin the briefing, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a little bit of background on these definition items. The Planning and Urban Design staff initiated the code amendment for the definitions of bedroom, kitchen, and bathroom, and partly in support of the goals of the Comprehensive Environmental Climate Action Plan, CCAP, and that would be of reducing stormwater runoff and the heat island effect. I'll go through more specifically in a few minutes. But also, staff initiated the code amendment largely in support of the Economic Development Plan goal of streamlining the permitting process and regulatory review to remove barriers to affordable development. And here's just some of the more specific goals that are addressed with CCAP and the EDP, Economic Development Plan, policy goals. And as far as CCAP, again, it's part of the initiative to adopt the revised parking ordinance strategy. And that more specifically, some of the metrics to decrease the number of parking spaces in the city. And then, of course, as we know, more parking does affect the drainage and erosion and also causes stormwater runoff. So, a metric would be improvement in water quality overall in that reduction. And then for EDP, we want to support the long-term growth of Dallas as the cultural heart of Texas, which we know we are. And a metric would be to approve 90% of building permits within 2 weeks. So again, these initiatives go towards those goals either directly or indirectly. And then again, for EDP, part of that is reforming the regulatory requirements that encourage affordable housing and accessibility between affordable housing and jobs, and then removing the barriers to affordable development through regulatory review. So some of the complications or concerns that staff has with the definitions, and I'm going to go through each one of these separately, but the current definition of bedroom means any room in a dwelling unit other than a kitchen, dining room, living room, bathroom, or closet, and then additional dining rooms and living rooms, and all dens, game rooms, sunrooms, and other similar rooms are considered bedrooms. So there's a lot of rooms right now under our current definition that are basically counted as, to be considered and counted as bedrooms. So the application of the definition that's causing some issues is there's several reasons. One, it doesn't fit the current conditions for the variety of rooms that we have in dwellings today. We know we have media rooms, we have bonus rooms, spare rooms. There's a variety of ways that we use our living spaces. It's an antiquated definition that has unintended consequences in the application of other regulations, meaning it impacts our parking regulations and it impacts our building code, although these are zoning definitions. So unintended consequences also could arise from claims. Apologize, that's not relevant to that slide. So other applications that are causing concern is bedroom has a direct impact on the number of parking spaces required for certain residential uses, and mainly what it impacts is multifamily and college dormitory, fraternity, or sorority house, because the parking requirements for these uses are based on a ratio per bedroom. So unintended consequences of overparking these uses of parking these uses is because surface parking contributes to approximately 80% of stormwater runoff, as we know, and that further increases the heat island effect as well, and also increases the cost of development, because we know that, of course, we've learned, parking spaces are quite costly. As far as the definition of kitchen, currently what we have in our development code kitchen means any room or area used for cooking or preparing food and containing one or more ovens, stoves, hot plates, or microwave ovens, one or more refrigerators, and one or more sinks. And it goes on to say this definition does not include outdoor cooking facilities. It's just inside the home or the structure. So the application issues here, again, this definition does not fit our current conditions either of our modern dwellings. Today we have laundry rooms and wet bars that may have mini refrigerators or even larger sinks, and also microwave ovens. We use our space a lot differently now than in previously and years ago. Unintended consequences may arise in the building code application if numerous rooms must be considered kitchens. Again, you can only have so many kitchens in a structure. So they do have implications for our other code and regulations. As far as bathroom, our current definition means any room for personal hygiene and containing a shower or bathtub, or containing a toilet and sink. So the application issues arise because only a toilet and sink is required in order to be considered a bathroom, which means no bathing facilities are required. And our current definition negatively impacts the building code definition of a dwelling, which requires a bathroom in a dwelling in order to be considered a dwelling. So what we're proposing, you had it in your packet, the new definitions. There's very minor tweaks to the definitions to try to make them fit our needs to today, and we tried to keep them as close to the original definition, and but yet making a big impact in how we apply these definitions. So again, by adding area, we're adding area to room, and we're making each room plural and adding language stating that rooms other than kitchen, dining room, living room, bathroom, closet, and living rooms and all dens, game rooms, sunrooms, and similar rooms not used for sleeping are considered bedrooms. So what we're adding really is not used for sleeping. There is a slight change I did want to bring to your attention. We looked at the definition again, and we tried to keep it very much intact in how it was before, but we are also thinking about just a little bit better grammatical structure and not with a double negative. We could also as easily say bedroom means any room or area in a dwelling unit not used for sleeping other than kitchens, dining rooms, living rooms, bathrooms, game rooms, sunrooms, and other similar rooms. So, but anyway, so the main point of that is that, we added in not used for sleeping. So as far as the kitchen definition, we're removing microwaves or hot plates and adding in or to the stoves, so that a room containing one or more ovens or stoves, a refrigerator, and a sink is considered a kitchen. So it's a three-part. And then also for the bathroom, we're removing or containing a toilet and a sink and replacing that with containing a shower or bathtub, a toilet, and a sink. And so now the definition has to have bathing facilities in addition to a toilet and a sink to be required a bathroom. So staff is recommending to move the definitions forward for bedroom and add language so that only rooms used for sleeping are considered bedrooms onto the City Plan Commission for their consideration. And also to move the revised definition of kitchen to include requiring ovens or stoves, one or more refrigerators, and one or more sinks as a three-part requirement in order to be considered a kitchen. And then lastly, to revise the definition of bathroom to include the presence of a shower or bathtub and a toilet and sink as a three-part requirement to be considered a bathroom. And you have that language in your packet. So next steps, again, if recommended by this committee, staff anticipates forwarding that recommendation on to City Plan Commission in June. So what happens if we don't do this? Well, if they're not approved, then we're going to have our staff that's going to continue, and mainly I'm speaking about our permitting staff. They'll continue to spend additional time trying to approve plans for additional parking spaces. And we all know, they're spending a lot of time with parking spaces and with plans, but they're going to continue to have to wrestle with that, where parking spaces are required for rooms that are not even actually bedrooms, counting rooms as kitchens that are not kitchens, and also leaving a loophole for dwellings that to be approved without bathing facilities. So really, that means we're contributing to stormwater runoff, the heat island effect, increasing staff time to approve permits, and also, of course, increasing development costs and leaving the city vulnerable to unintended consequences with that loophole. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I was trying to be brief and move quickly because I know we have another item.
Yes, I have questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Blair. Thank you, Ms. Levy, for that presentation. We'll start with Commissioner Blair.
Can we go back to the definition of bedrooms?
Yes, ma'am.
And is it possible to consider in the definition of a bedroom is a room intended for sleeping that also contains a closet? Then that way you will negate out a den, because people do intend to use a den as a place to sleep. So if you must have a closet in the room that is intended to sleep in, as the definition will better define, I believe, and achieve the goal that you're trying to achieve. If you go, can we then now go to the definition of kitchen?
Certainly.
No, that's fine. You're fine. I'm trying to.
Kitchen.
Okay. Can we consider in kitchen that you to containing one of the more oven, stove, hot place, microwave, one of a refrigerator. If what you may be doing here is making, believe it or not, a garage, a kitchen, because a garage will a lot of times have a sink and a refrigerator, and that could be determined as a kitchen. So if it includes, it excludes a location where other uses are something to the effect that you can't have any other uses except for the preparation and maintenance of food, of cooking. Something of that in nature, because you don't, I'm trying not to say that you can't have a car in the same place that you have a refrigerator. Make sense?
Ms.
Well-
Davis, you guys have run into, I'm sorry, Ms. Levy, because it sounds like building inspection may have a point of view on how that's been interpreted.
Sure, yeah, so this, what we're looking at is the current definition, not the proposed. So the proposed is to remove hot plates and microwave ovens. Because right now, basically a wet bar is a kitchen. Because you can plug in a microwave, you can plug in a refrigerator, voila, you have a kitchen. And it's making life really difficult for everybody.
So if you also, what about a garage that you can plug in a microwave? A lot of, in my.
Right, exactly. Same thing. That's the current problem.
Because in my community, our garages are becoming man caves.
Right.
They have a TV, they pull the car out, they have a TV, they have a microwave, a refrigerator, and a sink. Huh?
In a dark room.
And a dartboard.
Right. But should that constitute a dwelling unit?
But
But is your garage a separate dwelling unit now? Because it has a kitchen, and it has an area for sleeping, and it might have a toilet and a sink.
But what I'm also saying is, you don't want, because there are communities where the garage has been changed so that it can be a dwelling unit, because it will have a sleeping unit. The only thing it may lack is a bathroom. So so I'm just saying that in considering the definition of a kitchen, I think we need to re-examine how to net out other uses, because I don't have to go to BI to make these changes in order to now seal up my garage door.
You should, yes, that requires a permit.
Okay, but they don't.
Yes, right.
They don't,
Without
okay.
permits,
And they seal up the garage door, and they make those a permanent seal, and then all of a sudden, you'll see changes to the exterior, so now you don't have a garage, but you have another living quarter.
So, Ms. Levy, could you pull up the proposed definition?
Could we clarify, these codes are referring to new builds, aren't they?
Or renovation? So that.
A renovation, but if you
zoning
renovate a
code
garage-
definition. Sorry, go ahead.
If you renovate a garage, the city's not gonna force you to put in another parking space. Is that correct?
They could potentially,
It could?
which is what they're trying to address.
Because now you instead of having a 3-bedroom, you have a 4-bedroom.
One per dwelling.
Mhm.
Well, it depends on what we're talking about. A single family requires one parking space in the R75 and R58 district,
Right.
and it cannot be in the front yard. So if you have a one-car garage and you want to convert it into another bedroom or a living room or whatever, then when you come in for a permit to convert that garage, we're going to ask, where's your required parking space? It's not the front yard setback. And a lot of people struggle with that. That's a whole other thing. If you're a multifamily and you're creating an extra bedroom, then yes, it would require an additional parking space, because that's how we base our parking requirements.
But it's more difficult in a multifamily. Well, no, because you could have a townhouse that is a multifamily, that you can do the same thing.
So, if we can focus on questions. So, and I want to acknowledge, I know we've got some members online as well. So Commissioner Blair, do you have any, I'm going to go online and I'll come back.
Yeah, and then for bathroom.
Okay.
I'm just gonna get mine all out and you do with it what you want, since they were all presented at the same time. In the definition, can we go to the definition of bathroom? Please?
The current,
Let's do the proposed.
Yeah.
Yeah, do the proposed, I'm sorry.
So I think it's the last one.
Okay.
Yes.
For containing a toilet and a sink and replacing it with containing a shower, bathtub, toilet, and a sink. That, in the proposed definition, what you do is create now a problem with anything that wants to have a half bath, meaning a toilet and a sink. And because I have the need to have, and most of us have the need to have a facility that does not contain a shower in a bathtub that guests can use. So the only thing I need is a toilet and a sink.
So, Ms. Levy, is that part of what this proposed definition will address?
The one on the slide is what is
Amendment.
proposed, and we did discuss the half bath versus, a full bath. And for the application complications that permitting is having is not with the half bath. Yeah, it's kind of inconsequential to how they're applying the definition, but it has great implications to how it impacts a dwelling unit.
Sorry.
Madam Chair, if I could make a quick comment, on page 3 of our staff materials, you have the strikeouts and the additions. And I'm looking at that, and that's a lot easier to get my head around than this.
And
I
that's,
can't compare and contrast when I'm looking at this, but I can if I'm looking on page 3 of the staff report.
Right, and yes, I
Better
was just,
go, is what I'm saying. Just-
yes, exactly. I was just trying to simplify what we're doing on the slide, but yes, it is on page 3. It's also, it's described in page 2, but the strikeouts and the add-ins, strikeouts are in, and then you have in red what's being added, the words.
okay, so thank you, Ms. Levy. Commissioner Blair, just to clarify your question, you're saying that a powder room should potentially be considered a bathroom?
Yes, because you do basic hygiene and go ahead.
So the only time we use bathroom in our zoning regulations, our development code, is in the definition of I can't recall any other reason why we would regulate bathrooms. Is in the definition of a dwelling unit. So a dwelling unit is a single housekeeping unit that contains one or more kitchens, bedrooms, or bathrooms. And so if you have a half bath in your pool cabana that doesn't have a shower in it, the code says, so if you have a half bath, the code says that we call that a bathroom. So it could contribute to you being considered an additional dwelling unit for your pool cabana.
So, and I hear
But the practice that we've done is, since it has to include areas for hygiene, we have not considered those as bathrooms for qualifying them as additional dwelling units.
So
So this is more of a cleanup on the bathroom end.
So how many, this manages to a small, in my opinion, a small subset of residents in Dallas that has a cabana with a pool. But there's a much larger subset of residents that have bathrooms. The way that you're doing the defining bathroom it means any room used for personal hygiene containing a shower or bathtub, a toilet and sink, it takes the majority and lets them out. Because now, what you've done to my property value is negated my property value, because you now say I only have 2 bathrooms instead of 2.5.
So for Ms. Levy or Ms. May, this is zoning code. This is not how, I guess, either real estate or other building code would consider bathroom. This is only the application of zoning. Is that correct?
But the application of zoning says that if I have
I'll get you next, Mr. Barry.
You can still have your powder room. There's nothing that's gonna prevent you from having a powder room in our zoning code with this change. It's just saying that we're not gonna count your powder room in your pool cabana as a second dwelling unit, you gotta go to the board now.
Or within your home,
Yes.
or within your, if you in fact had an accessory dwelling unit or any other portion of the code, it's simply how you're interpreting these for other
Right.
regulations related to zoning, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I
This
think
is just in 51A.
it might be good if we can, I'm trying to keep some notes of all the questions to get some clarifications coming forward. I want to go to Mr. Baring and then back to Commissioner McGregor. Mr. McGregor, come on. Hang on. Mr. Baring.
Thank you, Chair. It sounds like with Ms. May's comments, really what these three definitions are feeding is clarification of a dwelling unit, which if I can summarize, it seems a single family dwelling would not be unaffected by this, but would be much less affected by this because it's limited by a single dwelling unit allowed anyway, right? So is most of this really kind of geared at multifamily uses? Is that true?
It's
Um,
really both.
It's both. I mean, as far as bedroom, I think bedroom affects the count, the parking count when you talk about multifamily. As far as the kitchen, the kitchen and the bathroom probably impacts a little bit more your single family dwellings. You know, they're each a little bit different.
Did that answer your question, Mr. Baring? And I think Ms. May has a further clarification.
Sure.
And also with the bedroom definition, part of the problem is a lot of multifamily developers and single family, but we don't really care how many bedrooms a single family has, will add home office. That's kind of a thing now, is to have a home office. But home office is currently excluded from the exemptions of what a bedroom is. So we've been counting all the home offices, all the game rooms, all the sunrooms, all those things as bedrooms. And it's really it not only adds to the parking, but it also adds to the minimum lot size requirement. So it's also an equity thing of we're saying, oh, no, you can't have that because you have to have a bigger lot now. So the bedroom really kind of has more multifamily benefits to it, clarifications, because right now, if they put a home office in a apartment, a brand new apartment complex, which is really common right now, we'll say, oh, that's a different room that's not one of these exceptions, so we're gonna have to count that as a bedroom. And they're like, well, what if we put a 6-foot wall between the home office and the living room? Is that a separate room? And then we get on to all these witch hunt gymnastics on how to not count this home office and these other random rooms as not bedrooms.
That was not the original intent.
Yes, which was never the intention, to make that home office or the sunroom a bedroom. Because as Brian can probably explain a lot better, bedroom in building code needs some particular life safety things for it. They have to have safe egress and things like that. So it's just a conflict between zoning and building code for zoning to say, ooh, that a home office is a bedroom.
So, Mr. Baring, did that give some clarity to what you were trying to flesh out? Okay,
Thank
so I
you.
think Commissioner Blair has a quick follow-up and then Commissioner McGregor, or Ms. McGregor.
So you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so having a closet, would that not be an easy fix? Because if you have a closet, the intent would be to have a bed.
Yeah, I think adding a closet is a perfectly fine change to that proposal.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like it, I wrote it down.
Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple questions. My first one actually ties into this a little bit. As I see this language, it's the fact that it uses in the definition the term use for sleeping, use, but a room, as you said, an office could be an office for, and then somebody moves out, the next person comes in, uses it as a living room, as a bedroom. So I just wonder if there's a way to be more specific about not something that can change over time like use, but that's in the you know, when you see the house empty, is this a bedroom or is this an office?
So in that sense, that's why, like, we kind of get into the system of what's zoning, what's building code, what's real estate terms. And then we try to bring them all together and fit one of those categories. And so in your scenario, if I put because I had the house built, and I did exactly what he said, well, if I put a closet in there, even though I'm using it as an office, and then Miss May comes and she wants to buy this house, and she sees it as an additional bedroom, because I built it and it was an office, egress was not required at that time. And that's why when you start doing things such as saying specifically a closet makes this a bedroom, you start to box yourself in and you start to get into building code and real estate terms, even with the half bath versus full bath. Appraisal district does it their way, building code does it their way, zoning does it their way, real estate sells it their way. We have to really try to focus on what zoning wants to do in our zoning definitions and eliminate the other categories in that scenario. And that gets to what you were saying was, how do we make this term of a bathroom specific for whomever moves into this is still a full bathroom. And it's still what, half bath, full bath. Again, you can get into the weeds of that.
Let me follow up on the original question then. So I agree, it gets convoluted. I would even, as I think about that, even a bedroom or closet could be a guest bedroom that doesn't require more parking, right? We shouldn't have that requirement. So is it fair to say that we're trying to solve a parking issue through definition of rooms, where we should be trying to solve it through parking?
Well, it's a combination of the things. So you're also, like you say, trying to solve the dwelling unit, because again, with all the
It's next on my list.
yes, as we're moving, thinking not just the 1982 definition that we're now trying to conform to 2022, that as we move forward, we're not having this conversation in the next 2 years again. So you're trying to figure out, as this movement goes, as technology change, as design change, what are we going to? Kitchens are no longer just 4-box walls. They're open areas now. And so that's where some of these definition changes are based on best practice of what we see, and the direction of the design.
So let me just go back there, because that was my last piece. Is one of the issues that I know is going to come up is the definition of ADUs, and we know that there would be a great benefit if we can encourage people to use them or even rent them out. What
Did we just,
Side additional parking, because that additional dwelling unit will still need another parking, surface parking. But it's clearly kind of to define, is this a man cave? Is this a additional dwelling unit? Is this just somewhere that I go just for a few hours to have fun, or somebody's gonna live here for the next year or two? So I think you're able to now have people truly design with their intent versus trying to manipulate the code by not showing a oven or a sink on a floor plan, when all along the intent was for you to make this an ADU to rent, or for an in-law to live there, a disabled person to live there, or whatever the situation was, to where you still have multiple dwelling units on that particular lot. And I think that's why these definitions are to clearly define what's going on there. And in terms of your surface parking, again, with the definition of your bedrooms, that's how you kind of get into, I now have to have more solid ground per se, as opposed to natural grass, natural earth, to allow water flow. This surface parking means I'm going to have to build it up to a certain level, have to have certain materials, and it eats into your citizens' cost, on your developers' cost.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think I heard Mr. Reeves
Yeah, you guys just went out on me for a second. I was wondering if it was all of us, but right as you came back on, it was right when I was asking the other people if they'd lost you too. So sorry about that. So question, if I, and probably to you, Sarah May. Hello, Sarah. In our neighborhood, we have problems with fraternity houses, whether they're legal or not, right? Everyone's parking on the street, front yard or whatnot. So if I have a room and that room has a closet and that room has a sink and a little refrigerator in it, what is that room classified as?
Does it have a bathroom?
No.
Then it's just a room. It's
Would
not
it
a
be?
dwelling unit.
It would not be a dwelling unit. So I could build a duplex or a triplex with 6 10 by 10 rooms with a bathroom, with a sink and a refrigerator, and that would not count as a bedroom?
What, not as a bedroom or not as a dwelling unit?
I mean, as a bed, because right now a multifamily has to have a parking space for a bedroom, right? So
Right.
I'm thinking, how would they punk that? That's right where I'm going. How would I punk that to get maximum and not have to provide any parking? Because my other question is, if we don't have this surface parking, what ends up going there? Because if the structure just gets bigger, then we didn't solve the stormwater problem, which is another question. So anyway, so if I have a room that has a sink in it and a refrigerator in it, what is that room classified as? Would that be a bedroom still?
Does it have an electrical outlet?
Yes, most bedrooms do. Yes.
Well, most
Okay,
rooms do.
Okay, so it's a room with a refrigerator and a sink, and you can plug in a microwave, so it's a
Yeah.
kitchen. If it's also an area for, what does the bedroom say? If it's not a kitchen, so if it is a kitchen, it's a kitchen.
So I could have a house or a duplex or a multifamily with 8 kitchens in it potentially that didn't require any parking?
Yeah, it doesn't require.
Look, follow up if I may, is there
Yeah.
a size related to, so think of an efficiency apartment. So if we took this example and we've got a microwave, we've got a sink, or we've got a refrigerator, we've got a sink, we've got an outlet, we can plug in a microwave, that then would have a kitchen. What would be the size trigger that would then consider that to have sleeping quarters, which would then fall within bedroom? It wouldn't necessarily have a personal hygiene facilities, wouldn't have a bathroom, so that would not be considered a dwelling unit on its own.
Correct.
But if it was part of a larger it's in, to Mr. Reed's point, how are sizes part of what building inspection considers?
Or not?
It's zoning, or not.
I mean, could I have a building with 7 kitchens in it and basically no classified bedrooms?
Right, so building code has some size requirements.
Yeah, so that gets into the building code side, and so that's where we talked earlier about the conflict of definitions that are created in zoning cause a conflict on the building code side. Building code dictates, if a room is a certain size. Zoning is just gonna dictate the overall size of the building. So, again, that's
And
trying not to muddy the waters and trying to not bring building code into what we're doing. This is supposed to kind of stay focused on the zoning side of this.
Well, because I could have an Airbnb problem too, a party house with 8 kitchens in it, and where I have fully intention of people sleeping there, and I rent each of those out 8 times, because they have, and I have the bathroom down the hall maybe, and all of a sudden I have a hostel, in the middle of, a neighborhood. So, I mean,
We have.
You have like-
So, yeah.
dwelling units, got a fraternity house, a dwelling unit is a single housekeeping unit.
So could you read the definition for everybody one more time of dwelling unit? And I want to give us all a time check, because we do have 2 items to get through, so I'm trying to get some summary notes so we can cover both of our agenda items today.
Dwelling unit needs 1 or more rooms designed to be a single housekeeping unit to accommodate 1 family and containing 1 or more kitchens, 1 or more bathrooms, and 1 or more bedrooms.
So to be considered a dwelling unit, but
it says one family. Yes, one family.
but it's still, and again, I think where this started was trying to address parking code, which is generally tied, well,
Yeah.
stormwater related to parking, related to lot size, and I think that may be the other thing that may be helpful for all of us, Ms. Levy, is if we can outline what our goals in addressing this. You hit a couple of them up front, but kind of outline so that there's a better understanding of the implications. I think that's what we're all trying to vet out. What are the
Right.
implications of these changes
Yeah.
that maybe weren't necessarily in the goal, but might come out of it?
And I'd say like for the building inspection side goal is, ever since we've had these definitions since 2004, it's been a witch hunt on every single accessory building someone builds in their backyard. It's been, I think you've got a kitchen, a bedroom, and a bathroom. So you have to go to the board. Oh, okay, you're going to take out your tub. Okay, it's fine now. Or okay, you're not going to have a refrigerator. Okay, that's fine. And then the neighbors get upset, and then we're in code. We're dealing with 311, and it's just like this.
And if I may add to that,
Messy
you have no way of knowing that, for instance, in our case, the guest house did not count as a building unit because it didn't have an oven. But there's nothing to say that after the code was released, you can just take it on.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the
Not that we did that, we did.
the proposed change of removing the hot plate and microwave, to have an oven or a stove, you need a greater electrical supply to plug one in, and that obviously requires a permit. So it would be, and it's a lot harder to like hide your stove when code knocks on your door, than.
All right. So,
It is, yeah.
I apologize, I forgot to acknowledge for the record that Mr. McGregor did join us at 8:33, and Commissioner Kingston is also with us today, just for the record. Ms. Bagley, I cannot see you on the screen. I wanted to do one lap around the room, and Mr. Hall as well. Did you have any questions, Ms. Bagley?
You can't, hang on.
We heard you briefly, but didn't hear if you had a question.
No, I don't have a question.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hall, any questions, comments, observations?
Is a wine chiller a refrigerator?
Sure.
Okay.
So I'm going to attempt to summarize and ask everyone to raise their hand if I missed any items that we want to get addressed. I think we've got enough questions that we're going to ask for this to come back to us. So the first question, Commissioner Blair made the observation about including, what would the inclusion of closet within the bedroom definition and what implications would that have as potential clarification? I think it might be helpful if we could outline for each of these definitions, zoning versus building code versus
Real estate definition.
real estate, just to understand, is there any alignment that might be beneficial in terms of zoning as we're trying to evaluate these revisions? I made a note, what are the implications for our other components of zoning? We've talked about accessory dwelling units. I think there's a question of, within buildings, how will this be interpreted? We've talked about dwelling unit, maybe understanding how the dwelling unit function is tied to other components of the code. Lot sizes, lot size, parking, and stormwater are the three objectives, but are there other things that will come out of these revisions? Did I miss any items?
One that I would ask, I'm sure that staff just look at the language and whether or not using the term use
Including.
should be considered because it can change when, the next person comes in.
Commissioner Kingston.
Thank you. And I would also ask you, as you're looking at this idea of including closet in the definition, to think about how that impacts studio apartments, micro units, because I think those are here and going to be more common in the future.
So what does that mean?
they may not necessarily have this closet. Or you may have a common room that serves all purposes.
Built-in furniture or no work. Okay. Ms. Levy, did you capture all that?
I believe I did, and I'm sure that I can go back in the audio or I'm sure, I think between all of us, we probably have it.
Okay.
But I think, I guess I could summarize it real quickly. You wanted to address the question of the impact of adding closet to the bedroom definition, and just zoning implications versus ADUs, how it's interpreted with lot sizes, and the difference between real estate and building code. I don't.
Well, and I think there's essentially 3 buckets for the definitions for these. One will be zoning, one will be permitting, and one will be real estate.
Right.
Right.
Right, which we can't really address the real estate, but yes.
No, understood. I think we're just trying to make sure, is there anything that might influence how we're evaluating the zoning side of it? Thank you. Other thoughts? What we do?
How do you merge?
You may
BI and zoning, because one of the purposes I understood this to have was to get building permits in a more timely fashion. And so if we don't address the merging of zoning definition and building inspection definition, we don't achieve that goal.
Potentially, but I think Ms. Levy's raising a question about real estate may have implications beyond what
And I
those two would be.
and I get that, so I've moved past that because I agree. Because with real estate, it's all intent opposed to reality in application. Because what we do in zoning and BI, maybe, and I'm sure Mr. McGregor can, you're real estate. Yeah.
That's,
Okay.
I act like a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Real estate is entirely different.
All right, so I've got 4 action items, and Ms. Levy, thank you very much. We appreciate you being with us. All right,
Thank you.
Are we coming back?
we're coming back, please, to address those 4 items.
And one other thing, I also want to acknowledge that Commissioner Popkin is online, and Commissioner Stannard had been, she's on already. Noted that.
Thank you. I could not see everybody,
That's
so
okay.
thank you for being with us, Commissioner Popkin, and hearing the discussion. All right, so Ms. Levy, thank you. We'll go to our next agenda item. Mr. Doss is here with us in the briefing room. Good morning.
Good morning. Mike, I don't have the ability to share my screen.
You do now, sir.
Are you ready for me to read the item into the record?
Yes.
Great. So item 2 on the agenda, case number DCA 212-006. The request is consideration of amending the Dallas Development Code section 51A-2.102 definitions, section 51A-4.408 maximum building height, and related regulations, and related sections to modify how building height is measured. My video is in front of my words. So a little bit of background, the proposed amendments before you today originate from our building inspection division within the Development Services Department. The really quick hit is that the current code definition of height essentially requires all applicants to obtain civil engineer grading plans so that staff can establish a basis point for measuring height. And that is timely is not the right word, it's a time intensive and costly requirement. place on applicants. So this is just some background information. This is the current definition of grade. And the important parts are essentially that we have to measure, the current code is we measure height. The beginning point of measuring height is from grade. Grade is defined as the average of the finished ground surface elevations measured at the highest and lowest exterior corners of a structure. For purposes of this definition, finished ground surface elevation means the ground surface elevation of the building site before any construction, or the ground surface elevation as altered in accordance with grading plans approved by the building official. And then finished ground surface elevation does not include fill material that is not necessary to make the site developable, berms, or landscape features. So we not only have a definition within a definition, we have exceptions within a definition for grade. So that's where we start from currently. And then there's also the other side of height is where you measure to the top point. Current definition of that is that height means the vertical distance measured from grade, which we just established, to the structure, for a structure with a gable, hip, or gambrel roof, the midpoint of the vertical dimension between the eaves and the highest ridge of the structure. For a structure with a dome roof, the midpoint of the vertical dimension of the dome. And for any other structure, the highest point of the structure. So essentially going back to measuring from grade, that requires that every applicant submit a grading plan prepared by a licensed civil engineer. Staff then has to review that plan, determine what the highest and lowest points of at the exterior of the structure is, set that as the baseline, and then measure height. And often, Sarah can correct me if I'm wrong, but often there's a difference of 6 inches or less between average grade as established by the grading plan and the actual finished floor. More or less.
It could be a couple of feet.
It could be a couple feet, it could be 4 inches. So it's not, there's not like a general rule for it, but it's fairly close. So staff does recommend measuring from finished floor instead of average grade to simplify and expedite the review process. Finished floor elevation is always included on building plans that staff receives. So it's our information we already have available. Many major Texas cities and nearby cities do use various forms of grade as the basis for measuring height. Some use curb level, some use the average grade of the street in front of the lot. So while they all do use grade, it's all very different variations on grade. So this would, if approved, this would move us to a different definition for most area cities. However, we do think that on balance, it will simplify the process for developing a balance. So I'll just run through an example. So this, once it loads, is kind of how we would establish grade. We receive the building plans and the grading plan prepared by a licensed civil engineer. And you essentially have to decipher this, and once you're good at it, you're good at it, but if you're starting out. So you can see there's different various points of measure. There's the, for example, the 474-foot contour line, and you can barely see my mouse. There are contour line elevation, contour lines, and then there are exterior measurement points at all of the exterior corners of the structure. So staff would need to review all of these points and find the highest point and the lowest point, do the math, and get your average grade. So in this case, the high point is up in the, we'll call plan northwest corner at 474.5. The lowest corner is way down here in the southeast corner, 473.78, which gives us an average grade for this site of 474.14 feet, versus the finished floor as labeled is 474.5. So that's a difference of about 4.3 inches for this case. Obviously, every lot and site is going to be different, but for this one, it's a difference of less than half a foot. And these grading plans also runs into some, how do you look at these things? And actually, when I first saw this, Sarah sent this to me, and I had to, I argued with her on what the actual lowest point of was, because you can't really see it. So it's again, one of these things where you've got to do a lot of review and you have to be really well versed in looking at these things to establish what your basis is. So for our proposed amendments for this section specifically would be that the height definition would be changed to height means for structures with a floor area, the vertical distance measured from the finished floor of the story that is nearest to and above grade. So that would be your first floor, not include any basement, so we would not be measuring underground. And then because we've now added in this floor area, we have to add in the second piece about that for structures without a floor area. So there's no finished floor to measure from, then you would measure from the vertical distance measured from grade to the highest point of the structure. So that would be back to normal, but for structures that have a finished floor, we'd be changing where we start our measurement from. So that's our basis for height measurement. The next step is where you measure to. And this is really, these proposed amendments are more cleanup than anything. So this is the current existing code. The underlines are just for emphasis. So again, we're looking at the midpoint of the vertical dimension between eaves and the highest ridge in most cases. So the historical interpretation of the midpoint of the vertical dimension between the eaves and the highest ridge of the structure is that you measure from the highest ridge to the lowest eave. Establish your midpoint, and that is how tall your structure is. So essentially, and we'll move to the example pretty quickly, is that this creates an opportunity to gain additional building mass above what would typically be the maximum structure height by lowering 1 eave, because we now have lowered the midpoint. So this is an example of, let's take the orange line to be 36 foot, your district maximum height. And under the current measurement, the home on the left, we would measure from the midpoint of the highest ridge to the lowest eave. And on the home on the right, we are also measuring from the highest ridge to the lowest eave. So even though these homes are considered to be the same height, you can see the home on the left is much taller than the one on the right. But they both are 36 feet tall by our measurement methodology. So if we were to move ahead with these proposed changes to the top measurement point for height, that would be, we would essentially say that for the structure on the right with eaves, for a pitched roof with the eaves at the same height, you would measure to the midpoint of the highest ridge in the eaves. But if your eaves are at different heights, we would instead measure that midpoint from the highest eave instead of the lowest eave. And that would end up, we would measure it this way instead. So the home on the left, the blue line would be proposed how we would your new height for that structure. And if that exceeds the maximum district height, this structure, you would not be approved. We would say, your building is too tall, you need to reduce it. And so we would essentially be normalizing different homes. There we go. So then we would be, errors are on point. Essentially what we're doing, okay, now these homes they're measured at the same height and they are the same height, instead of what the current methodology requires, where one home is way taller than the other, but we call them the same height because of the way we measure. So we're also proposing to add some definitions of roof types. Currently, there's no definitions of any of these roof types. So we say that you measure a gambrel roof from the midpoint of the eaves to the highest point, and we don't tell you what a gambrel roof is. I didn't know what one was. I had a general idea, but now I know for certain. So the proposal is just to include these definitions just for clarity in the definition section. We added in minimum pitch for all these slope for pitched roofs. 1 to 6 rise over run is what building code considers to be not a flat roof. So that's what we set the minimum pitch at. I don't necessarily know that that's a must-have in these definitions, because building code will catch that on their review. We're adding in, again, hip roof, salt box roof, and shed roof And then another proposal on height would be to measure shed roofs to the highest point of that shed roof instead of the midpoint. It's kind of the same situation as a salt box roof, where a shed roof home can gain additional massing above what the district maximum height would be compared to a typical hip or gable roof. I don't have an illustration for this, but it's essentially the same issue we see with salt box roofs with different heat heights. We're also a little bit of cleanup and clarification for special height provisions. So paragraph 2 in the special height provisions for maximum building height are essentially structures that are allowed to be on top of a building. In districts where the building height is limited to 36 feet or less, we have a list of structures that may exceed that maximum height by 12 feet. Staff's recommending that we kind of just clarify these, add in rooftop access stairwells to be an allowed structure on top of a roof. We're still working on establishing what the square footage of that access stairwell could be or should be. And we're also proposing that we add guardrails to the parapet wall, basically throwing guardrails at parapet walls. And that's really a cleanup based on plan review experience. We also have a note at the bottom of the special height provision that creates confusion and potential conflict between these structures that are allowed to be taller than the maximum building height. But this note also points you to residential proximity slope height restrictions that are already contained in each district regulation section. So it's clearer, in our opinion, to delete this note, and the district regulations for RPS always control over these allowed structures. So RPS would continue. Deleting the note does not change anything on how we are
It's
actually
it's a conflict.
administering. It's just a conflict that
It says, this is an exception, and then you read the exception, and you said, it's not an exception, go back to the district, and you're like, what do I use?
So this is really a cleanup and clarification. So next steps would be obviously discussion and either forward the proposed amendments or give staff direction. So with that, we of course have Sarah here to answer any specific questions. But that's the presentation.
All right, I'm going to say something to start off.
Yes.
So as Stephen showed that grading plan in the beginning, it takes a lot of effort on behalf of staff and the applicants to be like, I'm sorry, I know you thought you should measure your building from finished floor, you're so sweet, but that's not how it works. You got to measure it from average grade, not grade as building code defines it, not what you think grade is, but grade as we have defined it uniquely in the city of Dallas. Go get an engineering plan and, oh, I'm sorry, that's gonna break your budget. I'm sorry, that's what the code requires. You have to go do that. And then we go through complaints, we go through council, go through everybody in the world because they're upset that our code says that we have to measure from average grade. And in the end, it's not a huge difference. You know, that's my main goal is let's make this more easy to read, easy to understand, so that we don't have to go through a dozen revisions to finally come up with, okay, it's fine.
Clarification, can I, even before questions, just point of clarification, is it, this would apply as well to the commercial office, everything else, right?
Everything.
And do you see the same amount of working problems with that, or is?
Yes, we have a slight, a little bit of, I don't know, extra, a little less restrictions on single family and duplex, which Brian can explain better than I can, but we have something called an infill waiver form that if they say, yes, we're not altering the grade more than 12 inches, like it's gonna be 12 inches or less, right, 12 inches, then they don't have to submit engineered grading plans. But oftentimes, they check that box, and in reality, they do need grading plans, and it is extra confusion. You know, I mean, like, they need to deal with water, they need to deal with drainage and, you know, all the grading activities, and these changes won't affect them having to deal with drainage. But it would relieve the pressure that everyone's feeling on going, like, I know you've designed your dream building here, but now let's go get some grading plans, you know? And then, you know, this also happens after zoning. So people come in for a PD, schools come in and they say, hey, I want to build a 30-foot tall gymnasium. And great, you know, go through all the neighborhood, you know, discussions and see if that's fine. But then they come in for an addition to the school and we say, oh, no, we need your engineering plan with your grade. And because it's from the highest and lowest exterior corners of the structure, we're not just measuring your addition, we're also measuring your 1920 building over there, you know, on the other side of your school. And now that that's downhill, you don't meet height and you gotta go back and get a PD amendment.
Ms. May, second clarification, and I guess Mr. Goss as well. This is only proposing to revise height definitions. Grade is not included in this. And so you just stated that there is an infill waiver if your changes are 12 inches or less, but you're seeing a predominance of submittals beyond that. Would that indicate that perhaps the grade definition either needs clarification or further refinement?
I don't think so. The problem is, and it's not every house that adds more than 12 inches of grade, but it happens. And when it happens, you know, we get complaints from the neighbors, you know, the field inspector catches it, you know, whatever it is, they have to come back in and make sure that submit their grading plans. But then we have to reevaluate, does the proposed structure comply with maximum building height? And so not only do they have to make sure that they get the grading and the drainage sorted out in a safe manner, but it could also put their building in jeopardy.
Could you go back to the definition of grade, please? Because I think this may actually tie into one of the fundamental questions I have on this, is that the grade definition, the two are tied together. But the grade definition also references the site, but ultimately it's the four corners of the building. But if we go all the way back to the plan, it looks like you had some natural grade on that one. The variance between the example that you had up, the corner of the lot versus the corner of the building was roughly 4 feet, one corner, one example. And so that automatically, in terms of the perception height, is going to be an increase. And so if the building site, and it specifically notes fill material not necessarily to make the site developable, how is that defined? Is that a matter of convenience versus a true, I needed to level the site because I had a 4 foot difference?
Well, so fill material not necessary to make the site developable has evolved since 2008 when we adopted that provision to be, we would ask our staff engineering team to get with their civil engineer. Their civil engineer writes a letter that says, yes, the grading proposed for this project is necessary to make the site developable. Stamp, civil engineer, sign. And we say, it's necessary. The civil engineer said in his professional opinion, it's necessary. So, and then we move on, and that's our grade. And that's how we start to measure height.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to have a number of questions. I want to start with our online folks, and then we'll come back to the commission. I saw Ms. Bagley first.
Yes, can you hear me? Am
Yes,
I on?
ma'am.
All right, I'm having deja vu here, big time. We went through some of this way back, and we were dealing with finished floor elevation on properties that basically were multifamily, but still there, where they were putting the parking under the building. So the finished floor elevation was higher to start with, when we called them dirt skirts, because they would do these garages and then they backfill into the side of the building. So the finished floor elevation that you propose using actually is bumped up from that. So that concerns me there as to how you measure grade. We had a different measurement for grade, and I think they were looking actually at curb level at that time. So it's concerning to me how you're using finished floor elevation when people try to do that. And I don't know, this fill material, berms, the berms, whether they're up against the building or they're out in the lot, it's difficult to determine. So finished floor elevation gives me a little bit of concern there on that one. And the other concern I have is on height. A lot of it, I think you've addressed in the slope of the roof determines where you're measuring to that midpoint. To the slope of the roof makes a lot of difference sometimes in the height, and it looks like you may have addressed it in that illustration that you gave. So I'm just concerned about finished floor elevation. That's the determinant.
Thank you, Ms. Bagley. Members, questions? Ms. Blair? Commissioner Blair?
My question is, most of this, but my question is, I have an airport in the district I'm home to that also impacts this because as well as it impacts my district because our terrain is not flat. But we also have to adhere to flight patterns and height patterns and what we can and cannot do. Does these definitions and the changes that are recommended also account for the challenges we automatically have because it's not a major airport, so we have smaller planes that are flying overhead and we have other things. How does that impact? How does having an airport in a terrain that's not flat impact the definitions and the changes you want?
So it would not impact.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I need to know. Okay. That's all I need to know.
Let me go back online, then I'll circle back. Mr. Reeves, I think I saw you, and we'll
Yes,
go back,
yes.
and then back to Mr. Barrett.
Yes, to follow up with Ms. Bagley's question. So an example, I always like the example. So I have a garage underneath my house that's 5 feet below the current grade and 5 feet above that grade. And so my first finished floor will be 5 feet above what our current definition of grade would be. Would that be a true statement?
That's a level, not a story.
Right, so, the grade is still gonna be intact. So if they are, so when we have the rare opportunity to look at basements in Dallas, Texas, which is pretty rare, then that's when we would want a civil engineering plan and we would want to evaluate where the average grade is. And then we would find the one that's closest to, we could change closest to and above. We could say the first finished floor above a basement, if you want to. I think it's unfair to measure from a basement.
Yeah, let me add information on that if I may.
Well, and I just want to, I don't know that we fully answered Mr. Reeves' question because the point was, go ahead, Mr. Reeves, I'll let you.
Yeah, Commissioner Kingston might be able to phrase this better because I know that you dealt with something over in your neighborhood like this. I'm pretty sure it was where somebody came in and they basically kind of tunneled 3, 4, 5, 6 feet below the current grade. Then they built up and they ended up having this, 3-story single-family residential house. And my question is if I'm 5 feet below the current grade, the way we current measure it, and that's my garage, and then 5 feet above that current grade is my first floor, am I getting my 36 feet from that first floor, which is now 5 feet higher?
I'd like to add information because I learned about this in a case that we had in my community, if I may mention.
Yes.
There's difference in the definition of a story and a level. And in a slope property, we had one of these cases in my neighborhood. If you put in a level that's at least half below the slope grade, then it doesn't count as a story, it counts as a level. If this is defining the first level of story, then yes, it would have to be the one above that. The floor level above that.
I think what I'm hearing, I think we have multiple evidence or examples that are being more common, is a 3-story property is putting the parking half below grade. So this is building up. It's not adjusting to existing grade. It is creating it artificially high than what I understand the intent of this is. And I think we have some answers from our.
Yeah, so, but in that scenario that you guys are referring to, you've already altered grade. And so therefore, you already have to go through engineering to get that additional 5 feet below and 5 feet above, because that's not the natural trajectory of the land. So if we're changing the natural trajectory of the land to be able to build this basement or this altered area, that has to go through engineering anyway in order to now say that this is grade in the definition that we're discussing for grade. And so now that finished level.
But I think what we're saying though is it's not grade. If we're changing the definition to finished floor,
Correct.
then we have granted additional height that I don't know is the intent. And I think Commissioner Kingston may have a clarification and then we'll go to Ms. May.
Listen, I don't like this idea of changing the way we measure height to the floor versus the grade. I can think about 10 ways to drive a truck through that. And it adversely impacts residential communities, particularly single-family residential communities. We've dealt with it in my conservation district, and I've seen it in neighborhoods now. I'm familiar with the case. It's one neighborhood over from me. And, you know, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. If somebody wants to develop property in this city, they have to comply with the rules. Now, if there's something we can do to make this process a little easier, I'm all for it. But throwing out any reference to where buildings sit on the land doesn't make sense to me. And with regard to height, I don't understand why we just don't measure it from the highest point of the structure. That's the way we do it in several conservation districts. It's easy. You don't have to figure out what the midpoint is. It's the highest point, done, we're moving on. We don't have to have all these definitions of types of roof. And I mean, it seems like we're overcomplicating something on the height definition that's pretty easily fixable. And we're creating loopholes on the how we define where we start measuring height in a way that's going to adversely impact single-family neighborhoods, and I can't understand why we would do that. There's got to be a different way to solve for this.
So I think with the height, and I don't disagree with you in terms of making it to the highest point. I think with that, you also now have to include that especially in single family, you have a max of 3 stories. And therefore, you can kind of limit height along, like in some of the conservation districts, where they say the max height is 2.5 or 2 stories. Things of that nature, now they're kind of limiting height from that scenario. So now your districts, your zoning districts would now be regulated based on that scenario. And those current max heights of 36 feet or 30 feet would have to be adjusted so that you don't have these tower structures going over some of the others. I could see it going another.
So I'm going to give us another time check here.
Yes, sir.
And I think this one is definitely going to have a lot more conversation needed. Ms. May?
Yeah, I was gonna go back to Commissioner Reeves' question. So the difference is, are we putting this garage basement in the side of a hill, or are we putting out a flat prairie?
Flat prairie.
Okay.
I'm going to speak for you, Mr. Reeves.
Right.
Flat prairie.
If we're on a flat prairie, and they're impounding dirt on the side, that dirt is not necessary to make the site developable.
No, they're not impounding, they're digging. They're digging.
Great.
No, they're going 5 feet.
He's also saying we're digging, yes.
Yeah, we're digging, we're taking the dirt and we're carting it away. So it's just there's just this 5 feet below the current level, the street, maybe, that is now 5 feet. All that dirt's gone, and that's where they have their garage, and then they build up walls, and that first finished floor is now 5 feet above the street.
And I did actually propose an alternate to Stephen about measuring to the highest point. And so I think he has some alternates if we want to go down an alternate route. But,
Do we have any non-conforming structures? That was-
absolutely, like if we were to change our height right now without any additional changes,
We'd have to
to
grandfather
say
in.
to say the highest point, we're gonna have a lot of non-conforming structures.
Can we grandfather them in? So it
Well,
goes-
they would be non-conforming grandfathered,
Oh.
you know, but it still makes life difficult for a lot of people.
I think you mentioned that this definition was updated in 2008. Was that just grade or was it also an adjustment to height?
That was just great. That's what
And so
we,
has height always been measured to the midpoint as currently defined?
as far as I can tell.
I'm gonna do a quick sort of speed round on questions that we would like to have come back as we're going through, because we do have another meeting that's starting in 7 minutes. So, Mr. McGregor.
Sure, so for me, I would like to know, if it's possible, as Commissioner Kingston brought up, to use the highest point, down on my notes. And what's the downside of that, the thought of non-compliance and so on. And then the second piece is, I do think it's important to come up with an easier way to make it easier for you guys to measure the ground level. I'd like to know if by adjusting this language so that we don't have the case that Mr. Reese brought up, you can artificially add 5 feet if you're comfortable level. So it seems to me that by being plain in language about, yes, you measure from the first floor that's higher or grade, except not including other structures that are a certain percentage below ground that would artificially, just address it directly and it might fix the issue. That's a good.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hall, do you have any?
No.
Ms. Blair can capture you with the airport question, anything else?
No, I don't have anything else.
Okay. Mr. Reeves,
Everybody's covered me, thank you.
Ms. Bagley? I can't hear you right now.
Here we go.
Thank
2 things. You need to establish a consistent grade, and this is not getting there for me. The other thing is, most cities that I've worked in measured to the ridgeline's highest point. And that may make a lot of buildings non-conforming because they played an awful lot of games with this height stuff for years. So it's just to get some sort of consistency where you don't have the building towering over the nice house next door, just because they can go higher with all sorts of weird roofs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bagley. Ms. Bering, or Mr. Bering, I can't see you. Did you have any final questions or comments?
Yes. Quick comment and clarification question. So, in my experience, Dal, I'm sympathetic to wanting to streamline the review process. The average grade, as is currently calculated, is not like the most difficult, at least from like the design perspective. So it's not terrible. And then I guess I want to question the initial statement that was made in the presentation of saving money on not having to do a grading plan. Grading plans are required by both residential permits and commercial permits. Are you saying that those won't be required any longer?
No, the problem is that you have to have a grading plan to know your baseline for your height. And if you are considering buying a property, considering going through zoning changes, and you haven't invested in a civil engineering grading plan, before you ask for those maximum height limitations, then you're putting yourself into a lot of risk to our interpretation of what your average grade is after the fact. After you
Right, but it's required for your building permit anyway, so you guys aren't. The claim that you're saving them money is not really true, right?
Right. They're only required on commercial properties when they're over an acre. So if you have a smaller lot for commercial construction that's under an acre, then we typically don't require engineered plans unless you're proposing to do a whole lot of grading activity. But remember, this is something we have to check height on every single addition you know, big or small, all new construction, you know, they want to add, you know, it's a very far-reaching definition that has a big impact on everything.
Okay, I haven't heard of the under an acre and grading plans are not required. If I recall, they're required on all commercial.
I could be outdated. That's what it used to be 10 years ago.
So I'm going to do my quick recap. So consideration of the highest point definition in considering height and what the implications of that would be. Clarifications of ground level versus finished floor and how that calculation would potentially then impact height. And then consider consistency in the grade definition, how average grade is defined. And I would also say if we could also get clarity, I think I would like to ask staff to address if there is a gap in between grade and height in the proposed definition. I can think of examples where we have requirements that a finished floor is a set distance above grade, which would then artificially add height that I don't think is the intent of this. So I think we've got some clarifications there. If we could have that addressed when we come back.
Madam Chair, will we address this? Will we make a motion to provide staff with a specific direction that you just mentioned?
That we can make that a formal motion if you would like. We didn't do it on the last one, but those are the three items.
I'll prefer that,
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if it goes up, but I have to, yeah.
Go for it.
Can I borrow your notes? So on the matter of, are we ready?
DCA 212005.
On the matter of DCA 212-005, consideration of any, the definitions of bedroom, no, I read it wrong, didn't I? On the matter, I'll start over. On the matter of DCA 212-005.
It's wrong on our agenda.
Oh, 006. Consideration of amending the Dallas Development Code sections 518-2102, definitions 51A-4.408, maximum building height, and related sections to modify how building height is measured. I move that we provide specific directions to staff. Thank you, ma'am. Would you read it for me?
To consider highest point and the implications of removing grade from maximum building height definition, clarifications to the ground level and finished floor definitions in the proposed revisions, and to provide consideration of grade definition and average grade definition as it relates to building height. And how grade is interpreted and interpret the implications in considering maximum height.
It's a team effort.
Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. So any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Mr. Doss. Thank you, Ms. May. And I apologize, I didn't catch your last name.
Thompson.
Mr. Thompson, thank you for being with us.
We
have approval of minutes quickly. Is there a motion to approve the March 3rd minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Blair. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Madam Chair.
And any opposed, no. I have one agenda item. If I want to just make a quick announcement, many of you may be aware that phase 2 of the concrete batch plants, public meetings are coming up. Mr. Castillo can send those dates out. We'll have those circulated. If everyone please be sure with the change in the city's addressing, some of our emails went to spam, so please be sure to check those and communicate with me if you're not receiving information, and we'll make sure we get that addressed. If you do plan to attend a public meeting, if you could please let staff know, just to ensure that we don't have an issue of quorum, that would be appreciated. But I think everyone was interested in following that discussion, so please do know those public meetings are coming up. I believe it's Saturday and next Tuesday. Thank you, Ms. Levy.
Next Monday.
Next
Saturday
Monday.
and next Monday. Yes.
Yeah.
Saturday, 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. And Monday, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Perfect. And, Mr. McGregor, you had any?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would recommend also making a motion for the previous item, similarly, providing specific direction to staff. Things written in paper are
Can we maybe pick that up on our next one?
of course.
We'll be a little more informal on our first item, but Ms. Levy, I feel confident we'll have it, and we will get back on track with that. So if there are no other items before us, then we will adjourn at 10:02 a.m. Thank you, everyone, for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.